Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Incident Response and Data Recovery Strategies and how to minimize the impact of a data breach. And we've got two guests today who I cannot think of two better people to have when we talk about how you minimize the impact of a data breach, because these two guys live and breathe this on a daily basis. If we were using the analogy of a war, these are the guys at the coalface in the trenches who are dealing with the preventing this happening, but also dealing with the cold, harsh reality of it when it does happen. So super interested to get their insights. We have Michael Kehoe, who's EMEA Threat Management Program Director with IBM Security. Mike was just telling me he's 25 years in IBM, so he definitely bleeds blue, I think, if you cut him. And then we have our own Alex Sandu, who's the Director of Security Operations in SmartTech 247. And Alex is a guy who, on his day-to-day job, is responsible for protecting some of the biggest companies in the world 24 hours a day with his team and dealing with every conceivable aspect of the stresses that cybersecurity brings. So super interested to get the guys' perspectives on dealing with incident response capabilities. So I guess we'll start off, Mike. Maybe if you could share with us a little bit about your perception on what the current threat landscape looks like, and some of the interesting things that you're seeing out there from an IBM perspective.
Sure, Ronan. Thanks for having me today. So threat landscape, it's radically changing and has been probably since around 2014, where you started to move from maybe the people who just want to show they could break into systems or do stuff to organized crime. And organized crime saw, hey, I can do money laundering, I can do human trafficking, I can do illicit material sales. And suddenly I've got a new business unit, which is cyber. A cyber attack. So you've really seen the organized crime ring move into that, and it's not the 16-year-olds in the bedroom with Red Bull, the hoodies, which we kind of see on the architecture slides when we search it. They are fundamentally organized crime units coming out of places like North Korea, Russia, and other places. And therefore, not only has that business grown from a point of view of the threatscape, the threat actors, but also the business. So you're getting things like RAAS, which stands for ransomware as a service, or malware as a service. But not only that, when you pick a target that you want to attack, you can actually go onto the dark web and find companies that will give you software or give you tips and techniques that will allow you into organizations. So it's not something that is on the the edge of maybe just hacktivists or non-serious folks. This is a serious business, and you've seen some serious attacks around the world where people have tried to either damage critical assets because it's considered a nation-state attack, or you've seen actually industries who've been brought to their knees. Look at HSE, from serious ransomware attacks. So the threatscape has evolved very radically and will continue to evolve over the last 10 years.
Thanks, Mike. Alex, over to you. I mean, you're a guy who is at the coalface, right? You're responsible with your teams for protecting large organizations from the type of attacks you're seeing. And I mean, what Mike has alluded to is something which has become more prolific, which is the commoditization of cybercrime, right? So the guys that are building the software to attack organizations, the different menu of options that you can now buy from in order to solicit those attacks has grown, and it's become very simple to do it. What are you seeing in terms of the threat landscape? I mean, is it credential harvesting? Is it DDoS attacks? Is it, is there any specific areas right now that are keeping you awake at night in terms of building IOCs to deal with and so forth?
So, as Mike mentioned earlier, ransomware as a service was growing, but phishing as a service was growing also. So we are seeing a lot of phishing campaigns daily. We are seeing people who get caught by by the most simple attack, which usually looks like a scam. But this is happening, and the organizations must invest in their people, must train them, must make them understand the importance of their roles that they have in place, and must make them aware about these kind of things which are happening daily. It's easy to fish now. It's easy to get a platform. It's easy to go on dark web. Everyone with simple Google knowledge could do it, and the service could be offered by paying for it. So you don't need to be an expert.
So let me throw a question at both of you guys, right? So I've been doing this for a long time, and as organizations like SmartTech and IBM and many other companies are innovating and building technology in order to try and stave off these attacks, one thing is for sure, the scale of the attacks is growing. And the reason the scale of the attacks is growing, it's not just commoditization of cybercrime, it's also the ability of the bad guys to orchestrate a lot of their attacks. So a high degree of the phishing attacks we see, a high degree of the credential harvesting we see, this is all automated, right? These are what we commonly refer to as bad bots. And then when their hook catches a fish, they typically it'll flow into a series of manual inputs where they'll try and escalate privileges and figure their way out around the environment and discover which assets they want to take off. And my question for both of you is that if somebody clicks on a link and somebody gets caught, typically when it goes down the chain to a hacker, that hacker is very sophisticated. They've got a good knowledge of the security tools that are in place, and they have a good understanding of how they can subvert the type of controls that are there to catch them. And that's why, let's call a spade, why ransomware attacks are successful. So could you guys share your perspective on that type of scenario? How is it that after the click has happened, how is it that organizations can successfully try and deal with these guys once they get inside the walls of the castle or past your security? Mike, do you want to maybe take first crack at that?
Sure, and I'd love to just get in the walls of the castle, because it actually is going to, when I was writing your question down, it gets back to, which we don't tend to use that often, but defense in depth. Defense in depth is a brilliant saying. It's saying that you have the moat, you have the wall, you have the sentries, and you have then the keep. And your attacker has to be successful to get through all these defense in depth. And really, when you look at a cyber defense solution, you should be looking at that. Say, okay, I know there's solutions like endpoint detection, EDR, network detection, then the SIM, then you have identity access management, privilege access management on your databases. Then you have the SOAR, which is probably the most important product in a SOC, keeping everything together. Then you have enrichment coming from threat intelligence. So to say that for an attacker to be able to climb the wall and move then through cross the courtyard into the keep and up, then you got to question, well, how integrated was your solution? You should be looking at, how can I stop them? Okay, if my endpoint didn't catch them, did my network detection and response catch them? Did my SIM catch them? Did I enrich with my threat intelligence? So we have to be looking at this, that it's not it's not individual solutions. So when you come to a cyber defense solution, you're saying, what is my end goal? And my end goal is stopping these guys as soon as possible. And then you have to say, well, where can I catch them as soon as possible? And therefore, you always have to have the holistic approach. And you're seeing that now with systems from IBM and our competitors, where we're producing platforms which have interoperable solutions with easy to intuitive systems for the person to work. So I'm sure Alex used to have that, you have 5 or 6 single screens where you'd have, and you try to work out, well, we're going the direction of all that is converging, and we're going to stop them anytime the bad guys move. But we have to evolve, because the threatscape is kind of evolving. So there's never going to be a plug and play and walk away. So I think, it is the implementation of defense in depth with interoperable systems and intuitive solutions for the people that Alex runs in his SOC.
So Alex, thank you, Mike. Alex, let me go to you, right? I get your point about educating people, right? And that's important. But let's assume with all of the best will in the world, we've educated our employees and the quality of these phishing attacks, the relentless tsunami of attacks that are hitting them. Somebody clicks on a link, they have their credentials harvested, these guys get on the wire. Talk to me about that type of scenario. I mean, in your career, you've seen it many times where you've been called into an incident response capacity, and organizations have fallen victim to that type of attack. Can you share your perspectives on it? What can be done better? You know,
I will say just justify what I said earlier about the user awareness. And I'm saying that because I saw phishing attacks which were evolved that much than any security tool that the customers have in place were going to be passed around. So the most of the sophisticated phishing attacks now are using legitimate resources like Microsoft, like Google. They are using CAPTCHA. They are using Microsoft Forms. They are trying to bypass the security tools. So at the end, it's remaining the user. The user, if he's reporting it, that email will go throughout the email security solution. The email security solution will not be able, because it's just using a sandbox. So it will not be able to pass all the sophisticated things that are added there. All the legitimate resources will be seen as clear, but at the end will come at an analyst, which will have the ability to judge and understand the entire behavior, will be able to complete the CAPTCHA or to complete the form, and going further to identify the malicious part, malicious URL or malicious attachment which will be downloaded on his computer. After that, all the threat actors are looking for persistence. So if they got access, they need to look out for persistence. And most of the attacks that were happening in the last couple of months were going to get the golden ticket from Kerberos authentication. This is something that is happening 8 times per 10 attacks. So from 10 attacks, 8 times the attacker is trying to get the golden ticket.
Okay.
As soon as they get a golden ticket, they will have unlimited access to the network assets. They will be able to impersonate any user. They will be able to install or download any malware. They will be able to disable the AV solutions in place and so on. And that's the way one of the attack is going wrong. In this situation, when he got this step and he established a persistence in the environment, it's really hard to get him out. It's really hard to contain the threat. Everything is going to be complicated at that moment.
Yes. So guys, let me give a hypothetical scenario. Last year at Zero Day Con, we had some US government officials who came and they spoke about the concept of left and right of boom, right? And it's something that IBM frequently would touch on. And when we talk about left of boom, we're talking on the run up to the actual cyber attack taking place. And today's webinar, we want to impart some knowledge on how we minimize the impact of an attack or of a data breach, right? But let's take a hypothetical situation. So we're a large hospital, and we're let's say we're a private hospital. We're expanding. We've got an insurance arm in the business. We're going through some M&A activity, and we have a lot of moving parts within the organization. A lot of regulation, GDPR, HIPAA, PHI, PCI, and so forth. So we're a heavily regulated entity with many different moving parts. Now, let's assume that we have just received a call from some official sources, let's say the FBI or GCHQ, and they've advised us that they have identified some large repository of information on the dark web, which relates specifically to our patients or our customers. Now, that is obviously a nightmare scenario for anybody to receive. But the important point is that given the type of regulatory world we now live in, not just GDPR, but we've NIS, we've DORA, we've got CCPA, we've got many different regulatory mandates. that are stipulating that from the moment we've been notified of this breach, we're on the clock. And the typical type of timeline that we're presented with is 72 hours to disclosure. Now, my question is, what are we going to know in 72 hours? Was it a real breach? Is it a false positive? What regulations do we fall under? How do we contain this situation from becoming a massive, massive issue? Mike, I'll probably go to you first because you've given me some very interesting examples of scenarios where you've been pulled into these kind of incidents where they've gone right and they've gone wrong. And if we could talk back to this 72-hour benchmark from where we're legally obliged to disclose this, and how that relates back to minimizing the impact from a breach, please.
Sure. Well, the first thing I'd say is we should be designing for the breaches not to happen. And there's a lot of paper on zero trust, and you can take a look at that, which says every time, every place, every transaction, everybody assume a breach and make sure that you have all the relative stuff. So there is the zero trust protocols, but they're difficult to implement. But you have to start with that. You have to say that I can't tolerate vulnerabilities whatsoever because I know it'll have a knock-on effect. So we actually, an example of that, we did this, not too many people know, but IBM protected the World Cup in Qatar. So we had, and so we only had 3 weeks to make sure that our customer wasn't affected. And there was a lot of people out there who didn't really want to see Qatar succeed, and for various reasons, and I won't go into them. And we only had 3 weeks because after the event, the show will move somewhere else. So we really had to say, right, we can't say, oh, well, we put our hands up, we lost data, or we've been ransomware and the stadium won't kick into. We had to say, there is no alternative. We have to make sure anything that comes against us is known and stopped, and it doesn't get to deliver its payload, which could be shut down a stadium or shut down a ticket booth or knock out the hotels. We over 106 different locations we were supporting. So that's that. So that's the first thing. You got to get into a proactive. And I'm going to give you a new word for the day, Ronan. Is that the word IOC is used as indicator of compromise, and it really means that you've been pretty much compromised. I prefer the word IOC, indicator of concern. So we're looking at threat intelligence. Say, well, hang on, there's something floating around that might come in, or I'm looking at my attack surface management to say, well, I think I've left a vulnerability in which I should fill. So it's an indicator of concern. Let's find it before the bad guys find it. My SOAR could be improved a bit, that I'm finding stuff faster. So let's really do a hard training session with my SOAR process and make sure I've optimized my processes. So I'd rather look at indicators of concern than indicator of compromise. But I'm saying that if you are unlucky and your data is breached, and you are right, 72 hours, and I mentioned SOAR being an important thing, you shouldn't be ringing your privacy officer to say, who are you? What do you mean about this cyber data? You should have trained for this to say, I got to make sure that my defenses are the best. But if I do lose this and I say, you need to come down to my SOC, we're having the emergency meeting, they're coming down and they've done the training day with you. They say, right, what data has been lost? Here's the report I'm going to file with GDPR. Here's what I need. And you go, I got you, I got you, I got you. If you're making it up on the fly, you are burning daylight and you can't do that. So that would be, say, you got to prepare, hope for the best and prepare for the worst. Have your privacy officers down in your room, have them say exactly what data you need, because they're the items. If you've already trained for this, they might say, I need to see the data. Is it personal data? Is it credit card data? Is it health records? Well, all this has to be said, yes, it is. So all this has to be said, well, I actually have the federal search capability to show where this data was taken from, how it got there, because my GDPR regulator will look for all this. So you're not making it up on the day. If you are burning those 72 hours way fast, you should be doing. So I would say that, yeah, train for it with the stakeholders who aren't cyber, but who have to represent you in front of and it could very well be a legal entity where you have to defend yourself in front of legal. So it's about prepare, and assume that you will be breached, and assume that you need to do these things fast. But those 72 hours burn fast.
What volume of attacks were you seeing, Mike, for the World Cup?
Oh, that's semi-confidential, but I can tell you what, there's a couple, I'll give you what, remember, you were dealing with probably state actors who would just, Qatar does have some folks in the area who mightn't be too enamored by them, and therefore they just wanted to cause havoc. So we've seen a lot of those attacks. We also had, there was a couple of folks who might have thought that the way that the solution was awarded to them was questionable, and therefore they didn't have a financial axe to grind. They had probably a full philosophical axe to grind, and those kind of people are difficult because you can't stop them. So we were seeing attack vectors that you ordinarily don't see. If you're a bank, it's usually organized crime looking to steal your credit cards. Credit cards around worth $12 in the first 48 hours and it dissipates. These guys weren't looking for that. They were looking to say, Qatar, you know what? We don't believe that you should have it in this place. We don't believe how it should be picked. And therefore, they weren't looking for a financial reward, but they were looking for major disruption rewards. So our attacks were very, very different. They were prepared to splatter everything. So we were seeing a lot of, as Alex said, smart bots backed up by very smart people. But yeah, we were busy. But hey, the World Cup was very successful, so we're quite happy.
Alex, from your perspective, when an organization, I mean, you've been called into many incident response situations over your career, right? And when you're called in and the proverbial has hit the fan, right? And people are really trying to, they're under time pressure, they're under regulatory pressures, they're under every type of pressure imaginable. What should organizations focus on?
Mostly, the impact was increased by the lack of preparation. I saw that all the organizations are having missing things on the incident response plan, which is not regularly updated, which is not tested properly. The people don't know their roles and responsibilities in case of a data breach. Of course, I saw also some situations where the IT staff, it was not enough training, it was not keeping updates with keeping up with the threat landscape updates, and was not able to identify or classify an incident correctly, and that was the reason for going to be a data breach at the end. And of course, the coordination, the internal coordination between all these teams will play an important role. So that incident response plan must contain all the steps that the incident response team must take, must contain all the communications plans, legal and regulatory considerations, must contain all the steps that they need to do from start to end in order to reduce the impact of the data breach.
Can you give me an example, Alex, of, obviously I don't want you to name any names, right? But can you give
I can't do that.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of an organization who have fallen victim to a cyber attack where it has been handled in a very efficient and effective manner? What type of workflows kick into operation where they've dealt with it well, and what was the attack vector that was used? I mean, I don't know if you've thought this through, but if there's anything that's front of mind that you could give an example of how it played through and why it worked well, I think that would be super interesting.
I'm not remember exactly step by step what's happening, but we had an incident where we detected one user who clicked on a malicious URL. We didn't have the initial logs from the email security solution there, and we were not able to understand that it was a phishing. And that user most probably entered his credentials there, provided the MFA code either because there was an MFA in place, and that user got compromised. But in that moment, the SOC team reported that to the customer, and the customer, the person who had on call at that moment, because it was in the middle of the night, told us that he will discuss with the user itself. He didn't understand exactly what was the technique there. The incident was escalated because it was a high severity one. We were aware that that user have local admin privileges on that account, and that person who got our call didn't escalate it further, and it was raised as a high priority as a P1 in the moment when we saw anomalies in the Kerberos authentication. Like I mentioned before, we saw a couple of incidents where most of the attackers are going to take that golden ticket as a persistence mechanism. And at that moment, they had a really impressive incident plan in place, and the incident response plan, and they got all the proper teams in that call. We were able to identify all the affected assets, tell them they were able to contain the threat until the data breach happening. So they were not the attacker was not able to exfiltrate data. He was trying to move on the file server. We saw that, and he was isolated before happening. Everyone was coordinating perfectly. Everyone was aware who is having access where, which are the security tools that must be used.
Wow.
Who is able to manage the firewalls to isolate an entire subnet for that moment. What is the emergency communication plan, because it was about some Microsoft accounts which were compromised, and the communication using the Microsoft accounts was not safe at that moment, and they were having a backup communication plan for that. Everything was going really softly, and the attacker was contained immediately.
The way you talk about this, Alex, you're so nonchalant and cool and relaxed about how you talk about it, but this is bloody terrifying. I mean, somebody gets their local, their credentials harvested, and they've got high privilege access within the network. The ramifications of that, if the plan you described was not military grade, the fallout is incredibly damaging. I mean, depending on who they are, this is 9 o'clock news, what we're talking about. And this happens in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the consequences of this, you're so calm, cool, and collected. I guess that's why you're in a sock. But the consequences of this are so damaging. If you haven't taken the time and energy and effort to build that plan and have that military grade attention to who does what in the event of these credentials being harvested, I mean, the fallout is very damaging, right?
Yeah, we had also some situations where the customers were not that ready for this kind of incidents, and we were there in the call supporting them and helping them. You need to do that, you need to do this, before happening something wrong.
Wow. Mike, we can see, right, that, you know, this happens in the blink of an eye. And the one thing about these guys, they're like bank robbers, right? They got to get in and they got to get out fast, because they know that once the alert is raised, that people are going to mobilize really quickly to cut access and to contain the damage, the potential damage that can happen by this. And you've mentioned to me, you've seen some crazy scenarios in Asia and so forth. Can you maybe talk to us about some of the incidents where you've been pulled in, you know, at a high level with IBM, and the type of issues you've seen?
Well, I did, not cyber though. I've had a quite a varied career with IBM, and one of my areas was I ran emergency management. And emergency management is when Mother Nature or human nature delivers a body blow to your country. So I don't think IBM liked me much, because they sent me to Fukushima after the nuclear disaster, Orlando after the Philippines tornado, the mudslides in Rio de Janeiro, Sandy in New York. And I was working with organizations to say, when this happens, you've got a maybe 24 to 48 hour window of recovering. After that, it's not a rescue mission anymore. It's just a recovery mission. Sorry, a rescue. And how do you make sure that, and Mother Nature never plays fair. She will just dump stuff on you and she will double down. And you can see the poor Libyans this week with the floods and with the Moroccos and the earthquake. I used to work in those situations. So you say you can't second guess. As Alex said, the way you manage your incidents, the way you understand what's going on, the way that you make, even though they're snap decisions, they're well rehearsed, because the hurt is going to continue. And these guys who do a cyber attack against us, they didn't wake up today and decide the cyber attack. They spent 4 or 5 months doing the recon. They've looked at your Facebook, they've looked at your reports. So your annual reports might talk about fraud and cyber. They've looked at, well, who's going to be in, because they're seeing people on holiday. They're going to see, I can even go and if I was to go to a job in a bank, I can talk with the CISO and ask him, well, what type of SIM do you have? SOAR do you have? Now, I might be a bad guy, and they're just giving me the stuff. So you have to be prepared to say, well, we got to keep tight and we have to run these incidents, because when it happens, we have 48 hours to do. When HSE was attacked, the first message came in on the Friday and it was all over by the Sunday evening. 48 hours, knocked out in a government agency. So you have to have these incidents trained and locked down and incident processes and ready to roll straight away. And there's a lot of work on that. Process engineering is not easy. So, we, through yourselves, we do help clients to say, well, how do we set up proper cyber incident management systems that we will get ahead of the speed of threat? Because you've got 48 hours, just like emergency management. You've got 48 hours before you turn from a recovery into a complete rescue.
My heart rate is raising here listening to you guys. I'm starting to feel stressed with the
Don't worry.
the enormity of the challenge here. So what we know, guys, we know, talking about this, that the scale of the attacks is unrelenting. Organizations are facing this constant barrage, and at a minimum, you should have, a good incident response plan. And understand that when an incident does happen, that your troops are well drilled in mobilizing what they do. But we can also say that cybercrime is evolving and the commoditization of it is evolving. I think Alex makes a very good point, and I tend to agree with him. The vast majority of attacks are not that sophisticated. I would say that if we were to look at a dichotomy of the major breaches that have taken place, including the HSE or many of the global ones, they've been a consequence of clicking a link or having your credentials harvested by a phishing email, right? But that is now evolving. We're seeing that the ability to use large language models for building attacks to exploit vulnerabilities and so forth is becoming more common. So we have to continuously improve, right? So, I mean, Alex, one of the key tenets of smart tech is that irrespective of the tools that organizations have invested in, we will take what they have, make sure that they've got they're sweating that asset to get the best out of it. But you have to continually invest, right? Can you share your thoughts with me on that? Because if there's gaps in your tooling or in your solution set, then the chances are that they could potentially, over a period of time as this evolves, get exploited. So what does continuous improvement in your mind look like for a 2,000 person company who want to be in the top corner of what good looks like?
So what I saw for a couple of the organizations that we are monitoring, they have shifted their approach because of the evolving threat landscape to preventive threat hunting and continuous monitoring. And that was helping them preventing this kind of situations. Monitoring daily your environment, understanding your network behavior, understanding the user behavior, searching for different IOCs for get it from a threat hunting will help you to prevent. So I think most of the organizations at a point will move this into a preventive, actioning before happening. That will be the proper word. So most of them will start blocking things before going to be a full-blown breaches. I saw that for a couple of organizations, not all of them are having this interest, so not all of them shifted their approach in this area. But more and more are going to think like that. More and more are trying to understand which are the attackers that are usually interested for their industry, how they are going inside, what can we do to prevent such kind of breaches, what are the tools we need for doing that, and so on.
So let me ask you a question. Before we went on this webinar, I went into a dark web forum and I searched to see if I could buy a foothold, a bot sitting inside in a telecommunications company. and I saw 17 telecommunication company bots for sale. So somebody who had already got a CNC sitting in a telecommunications company. Now, I don't know where they are or who they are. I just saw that this was for sale. So if I decided to, send some crypto to these guys, it looked like I could buy access into one of these companies, right? So what you're saying resonates. I mean, it looks like these guys, the marketplaces on the dark web have verticalized attacks for each of these industries. And if telecommunications is something that's of interest to me, and if I can get an existing foothold in one of those organizations, now whether it's real or not, who knows, right? You won't know that till you get it and try and exploit it. But it feels like that if organizations are not looking at this very seriously in terms of their own vertical and the type of controls that they should be applying, then it could be problematic down the road.
Yeah, an internal threat will be much more dangerous than an external one, of course. So if they are not looking to preventive threat hunting and continuous monitoring of their environment, they could get a surprise like that. They could get someone which is already inside.
So Mike, let me ask you a question, right? You guys protect some of the biggest companies on the planet, right? And if I'm a large telecommunications company in Europe or North America, surely if Ronan Murphy can go on the dark web and see that there's a foothold for sale in a telecommunications company, why aren't these guys doing it? Why aren't these large organizations, trawling this information out there in the wild to figure out if they're a potential victim, or are they doing that? And if they are doing it, why do they continuously fall victim to these attacks? Because before today is out, there'll be another major ransomware attack in a large corporation who have not implemented the controls or the playbook that's needed to stop this happening.
So they are doing it. Threat intelligence is so you have your threat intelligence, and these feeds can come from threat intelligence reports that have been generated by, say what happened in HSE or so on, but they also have feeds coming out of the dark web. So those 17 bots would be known. So if I go back to IBM, we'll say the X-Force threat intelligence, we scrape the dark web and we look for that. And what we do is we get sticks and taxi information, which will tell us about hashes or IP addresses or domain names or additional information. So that's all readily available. So then what happens is these telcos or any of our commercial clients, you can't just look inwards. Again, you can't just be, I'm waiting for the indicator of compromise because now I'm on the back foot. I'm indicator concern. So what I'm doing is I'm sucking in the threat intelligence and I'm infusing that with any IP, any hash, any domain name that's in my network. And we call it, am I affected? So you're looking at items that might have got into your network. They haven't gone bang, they haven't gone moving yet, but we say that now bot is not what you think it is. It's not a free Domino's pizza voucher. It actually is a really, really malicious. And if anybody clicks on it before they come in, it goes. So what we do is we're able to then get into the indicator of compromise, think that that's sitting there, very benign, but it has the potential of going bang. And it hasn't broken a rule, but we've got correlation with our threat intelligence and we start to isolate it. So we actually, and this is where coming back with the holistic approach, we then isolate and go, this is an indicator of concern. She's getting isolated. Getting back to that, this is a proactive stance. And when you say, well, some companies don't, the reason being is they're very much in a reactive stance. If the rule gets broken in EDR, you got to get into proactive stance. You got to make sure that
let me challenge you on this, right?
Sure.
Why is it continually that some of the biggest companies in the world with huge budgets for cybersecurity and big security teams are continually falling victim to that? We need to figure out the answer to this question, because if large companies with large budgets are still falling victim to, let's take the Colonial Pipeline, right? Critical infrastructure, North America. It was talked about by the White House. It was such a huge breach. But even since then, we've seen another 200 similar breaches across every vertical in the North American market, right? And these companies, it's not like they're not spending money on cyber, but they're still having devastating consequences as a result. Before this week is out, we'll hear about another brand name who falls victim to the same thing. So while you guys are very eloquently articulating the solutioning and the technology that can help with this, why is it still happening, and why is it still happening at such a devastating scale to very large organizations?
Well, it is still happening. So there's nothing I can say on that. So then what you got to say is, well, how do we stay in front of this? And I think Alex had made the point. It's a continual process of improvement, and you can't take your eye off the ball. The worst you can do is good enough is good enough. Good enough will never be good enough. You have to be more advanced than the bad guys. Now,
so Mike, is that where the problem lies? Is do people believe that this is a one-off thing, that if we do it once, we're done?
Oh, plug and play, walk away. The regulator is going to be happy with this. Regulation and cyber defense has nothing to do with each other, because one's a risk item and one's a threat. Risk and threat are totally different. Risk can be quantified. Threat, I don't know who is out there today who's going to launch an attack against tomorrow. It is a Cold War we can never win, because I cannot take out my aggressor. So the only thing I can do is make sure I'm as safe as possible. Now, there are new things coming out. AI is definitely making a mark. Machine learning, automation is definitely making a mark. We are supplementing the analysts number 1, 2, and 3 with tools that can actually spot these anomalies in massive data sets. So AI will make a massive mark in protecting. But you just also said, Ronan, earlier, unfortunately, if I can buy those AI tools, so can the bad guys.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I was just about to say it, right? It's a double-edged sword, because I mean, it makes my life a lot easier if I want to go in and ask ChatGPT how to build a set of vulnerabilities and or exploit code in a maybe a legacy system that's used by a vertical. Then it just makes my time to value in terms of building this stuff much faster as well.
Yeah, so it's really get back. It's continual process improvement, period. This is a Cold War. We can't win, and it's with us regardless. It's you know, your CFO might go, oh, here we go again. You're looking for more funding. I'm sorry, it's the environment we live in right now. It is a reality, and we don't have to be the best, but we do have to make sure we're as protected as possible. Yeah, and again,
I think you make that point exceptionally well. I mean, this is continuous. We have to continually move, we have to continually evolve, and we have to continually ensure that the defenses that we're implementing are up to speed. Alex, in terms of what best practice looks like for an organization, could you maybe just share some thoughts? Give me an example of a company who've done it really well and are proactive in ensuring that they're fending off these type of attacks.
So in terms of proactive actions that they can take on, the continuous monitoring will be the first one from my perspective. And when we are discussing about vulnerabilities, vulnerability management is making an important and vital role for an organization. But that patch management must be done with a risk prioritization. They need to understand the attack surface. They need to understand if that vulnerability is really posing a risk for their environment, and prioritize them based on the risk and the impact that could have an attack against that vulnerability. And this is something that the organizations could do, and they will reduce a lot the attack surface that it's on their environment right now. Of course, threat intelligence and asset management is making a vital role here. And as much threat intelligence you gather and as much quality you get on that will be better for you, and you will be able to prevent hackers going to try to exploit you before happening, because you can see what is happening worldwide. You will get that IOC list, like Mike told us earlier. You will know some IP addresses which are doing that, which are C2 servers. You will know some new file hashes created with malware. You will know some new domains which were registered, and so on.
Very good.
And you will not be affected by any attack from them.
Yeah, so I mean that's helpful. I mean, what's really coming across to me from both of you is that this is continuous. You need to continue to evolve and to adapt. There is not a silver bullet that will fix this at a point in time. It's a moving feast, if you will. Mike, we're up on our 45 minutes, but you've been with IBM 25 years. You only look like you're in your mid-20s, but you're with IBM 25 years. Congratulations. But in that time, how have you seen organizations evolve to build a good cyber culture or cyber awareness culture? Could you maybe share your thoughts on that before we wrap up?
Well, I haven't been with cyber those 25 years, but what I can say, I've seen organizations evolve. We had on-demand, think, e-business. So we've always transformed our organizations, and IT is a great way of transforming organizations to capitalize on new market innovations and bring. And it always seems to be the second thing they think about is, oh, how do I protect this cyber? So everybody wants to build, put IT in, put in business transformation, generate new business, new market, new business opportunities. And it's always second that they think, oh yeah, now I got to defend it. You need to get that strategy aligned so as you expand, you build your cyber in at the very beginning. It shouldn't be an afterthought. So I've seen great business transformation, but the cyber seems to be always the second choice. We need to put them on the same playing field, at the same priority as we continue, because our systems will now continue. AI is going to change the way we do things, but we should be having AI safe cyber in at the ground level of design and not think about it afterwards.
Excellent. On that note, Mike, Alex, thank you so much for your contribution today. Fascinating discussion. Have a great day.